Bienvenue à tous. My name is Tanya Krivyak, and I am a proud graduate of Concordia's Department of Journalism. I'm also a reporter with CTV Television, and it is an honor for me to be your MC tonight at Concordia's Thinking Out Loud event, Reading and Writing Mordecai Richler, an evening with Concordia's Richler Writer-In-Residence. This past year, the award-winning novelist Ann-Marie MacDonald served as Concordia's first ever Richler Writer-In-Residence. And with that, the university is renewing a tradition, I should say. Mordecai was a writer-in-residence in 1968 and in 1969 at Sir George Williams University, one of Concordia's two founding institutions. Through the masterclasses, Concordia's Writer-in-Residence program offers an opportunity for established writers to mentor literary up-and-comers, some of whom you will be hearing later on this evening. The locale at the center of it all, of course, is the Mordecai Richler Reading Room, which opened in 2013. Now, you have seen some of the artifacts from that room out in the lobby tonight. And to paraphrase a line from Anne-Marie's novel, Fall on Your Knees, books are not an expense. They are an investment. Our university proudly houses part of Mordecai's personal library in our reading room. No doubt not a bad place to learn and reflect upon the craft of writing. Now, for those of you on social media tonight, our hashtags this evening are TOL 2016, CU Richler, and CU Talks. I would now like to invite Concordia's president to say a few words. He will be followed by Ann-Marie MacDonald, who will read from her preface to Richler's classic, The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. Now, please join me in welcoming Alan Shepard.
Merci, Tanya. I was just wondering, I was enjoying this, I was listening to the gasps in the audience. I was wondering what Mordecai would have said about hashtags and about Twitter. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à tous les membres de la communauté de Concordia et du Grand Montréal qui se joignent à nous ce soir. I also want to extend a special welcome to Florence Richler, who's here with us this evening, and to Michael Levine, who was the literary agent and lawyer for Mordecai Richler for much of his career. And I also want to send a thanks to Robert Reed and to the students who worked on the mise en scène outside. I thought it was beautifully done, and it reminded me of a visit I made many years ago to the home of Larry McMurtry in Archer City, Texas, where he was then. He went through Smith Coronas, not electric typewriters, and he had them rode up one after the next. There must have been 30 Smith Coronas on the floor. And he would rotate them around, and when one wore out, he would put it there for repair and on to the next one. Mordecai Richler, as you just heard, attended one of our founding institutions between 1949 and 1951. Puis, alors qu'il a encore une vingtaine, il part vivre à Paris et à Londres, où il connaît ses premiers succès en tant que journaliste, critique et romancier. Près de 2 décennies plus tard, reconnu mondialement comme l'un des plus grands écrivains et intellectuels publics du Canada, il revient à Concordia occuper une résidence d'auteur en 1968 et 69. It was a rich period for Anglophone literature in Montreal, and much of the activity was centered here, right here at Sir George. Along with Richler, Wynne Francis, Irving Layton, George Bowering, and Margaret Atwood were all professors or writers in residence here at the time. This pedigree and the founding of our creative writing program during that period helped Concordia attract and become the springboard for a number of nationally and internationally recognized writers. Our impressive list of alumni would include Annie Proulx, Stuart McLean, Ravi Hodge, Chris Banks, Johanna Skibsrud, Jonathan Goldstein, and one of my personal favorites, Nino Ricci. Richler's writing still seems fresh to us today for its expression, for its naughtiness, I heard the gasps, and especially for what he expressed. Through his fiction and his essays, he demonstrated the crucial rallying role that creative writers play in a free society as critics of what's going on around us. And by bringing a fresh and often historical perspective to current events, they can also help us imagine our future. And clearly the Richler family is proud of Concordia, of Mordecai's legacy. We're grateful for the Richler family's generosity to entrust us with his library and many of his personal possessions, his desk and chair, his passports, his typewriters, and of course, his cigars, to recreate the space which spawned so much deep thinking and raucous entertainment. One of our goals here is to retain the great writing talent we have and to recruit others to build further on it. One new magnet is our Writing for Mordecai's Desk program, which started, as you heard, last September. A writer-in-residence, this year Ann-Marie MacDonald, works on an original piece inspired by one of Mordecai's own works and coaches our creative writing students. We were delighted when playwright, author, actor, and one of this country's most engaged thinkers, Ann-Marie MacDonald, agreed to be our first writer-in-residence. Her exposure to Richler's work came early. One of her older sisters was studying the Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz in high school and was laughing out loud while reading it. Her sister told her, "Oh, you're too young for this book." And of course, you know what happens next. Ann-Marie got her hands on it as fast as she could, and she loved it. A great admirer of Richler's ever since, she wrote the preface to the 2005 Penguin Classics edition of Duddy Kravitz. My own admiration for Ann-Marie MacDonald is also long-standing, though not quite that long. Shortly after I first encountered her work while I was teaching at the University of Guelph, I taught her a Governor General Award-winning play, Goodnight Desdemona, Good Morning Juliet. Ann-Marie MacDonald has also distinguished herself on stage and screen. She won a Gemini for her role in Where the Spirit Lives and hosted the CBC documentary series Life and Times for 7 seasons and CBC's Doc Zone for 8 seasons. Her first novel, Fall on Your Knees, is an international bestseller in 19 languages so far, and her second, The Way the Crow Flies, is available in 13 languages. Both were finalists for the Giller Prize. Cette année, pendant qu'elle occupait le fauteuil de Mordecai Richler, elle est revenue s'installer à Montréal, sans doute heureuse d'échapper un peu à Toronto. J'espère qu'elle a autant aimé faire partie de la communauté de Concordia que nous avons apprécié sa présence parmi nous. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage Ann-Marie MacDonald.
When I started high school, my older sister told me, take typing. It's the only useful thing you'll ever learn. 2 years earlier, she had handed me Jane Eyre. Read this. When I was 16, she handed me The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. Here, you'll puke laughing. It's about our family. My sister got suspended from school, made smart remarks at the dinner table, and was fairly badly behaved in general. She told me I was a foundling. She told me she was an alcoholic. She was 11 at the time. And she claimed to suffer from tuberculosis. She made stuff up. But she never lied about the important things. Jane Eyre was as necessary for developing strong bones and teeth as vitamin D. Typing is the only actual skill I possess. Well, that was a few years ago. I can now play hockey. And if I did not exactly puke, I laughed out loud at Duddy Kravitz. And yes, it was about our family. Our middle-class, East Coast, Air Force Catholic family. Such is the transubstantiation that art makes possible. Duddy's coming-of-age story in the mean streets of 1950s Jewish Montreal spoke to me, a 16-year-old suburban Catholic girl sporting hairband and kilt. And it spoke to me again at 46 as author, actor, lesbian, feminist, and mother. A great work of literature communicates universally by being very, very specific. God is in the details, said Darwin, and so is art. Duddy is in his hopeful checkered jacket and two-tone shoes, in his hungry, darting eyes, squinting through cigarette smoke, in a lumpy bed curled around his brother in the night. Duddy Kravitz is every inch a modern comic novel, not least because its ending carries a whiff of tragedy. Our hero is compromised, his victory shadowed by some deeply unethical deeds. Should we be surprised? Can we still love him? Does he give a shit? Duddy has grown up so emotionally deprived that by the time he meets people willing to shower him with love, he is like a starving man with a blood disorder that prevents him from absorbing nutrients. He can't digest the love. He lavishes love on his grandfather, his father, and his brother, but when it comes to receiving it, he turns to his imaginary brother, Bradley, someone who will never let him down. Duddy does make good pragmatic use of the love that comes his way, but otherwise it bounces off of him and he is only dimly aware of it. His imagination is simply not equipped to recognize it as vital. And perhaps it isn't all that vital, because after all, Duddy wins in the end. Or does he? For me, the heartbreak of the story is not so much that Duddy employs some odious means to achieve his ends, but that his potential for love and imagination that winks into view now and then is pretty much squelched by the time he grows up. Duddy makes the most of the meager nourishment his upbringing has afforded him. He's a passionate man, constricted by a limited emotional repertoire. For Duddy, money becomes emotional currency, the means by which he shows love and loyalty. When a few key loved ones come to reject it as counterfeit, he is at a loss. We can't blame them, but even while we recoil at Duddy's callousness, we feel protective of him. His gift is unclean, but it's the only one he has to give. Money may be crass, even shameful, but for Duddy, it is love, and that's pathetic in the true sense of the word. Duddy Kravitz evokes the pathos of the clown, the naive genius. Duddy's grandfather shared one pearl of wisdom: a man without land is nobody. And Duddy has the innocent faith, the imagination, and the drive to make those words real. He is a great vulgarizer in the true sense of the word. He takes the lofty, clean dreams of others and concretizes them. He builds them up with his own hands. It's inevitable that those hands should get dirty. The question is, how much dirt is too much? The dreamers can remain uncompromised, or can they? Duddy's grandfather never had the guts to live by his own code and test the limits of its morality. Duddy's father, Max, has amassed a lengthy rap sheet of sins of omission. Uncle Benji's crimes are likewise those of the withholder, and Brother Lenny is a taker. Duddy takes too, but the difference is that Duddy is a generator, a creative spirit driven to make something out of nothing. He is motivated not by greed, but by its dangerously close relation, appetite. Like many people with great appetite, he is capable of great generosity. He exploits and nurtures in equal measure. Duddy's inspired vulgarity extends to class and culture. He vaults across barriers with raging exuberance, making all the unlikely connections that are possible when a young operator is on the move in the big city. He's anything but politically correct, but he is hacking at the fringes of a new frontier, and his Wild West is peopled with all the diversity that space and opportunity attract. The millionaires and mobsters, the shysters, charlatans, and bohemians, the simmering French Canadians, the striving immigrants, the outspoken cripples, shameless shickses, and drunken Englishmen are Duddy's true family. In Dodge, Duddy, the vulgarian in the checkered jacket, discovers classical music and poetry. He becomes a patron of the arts, an angel of mercy, a ruthless businessman. It's a dynamic world, a jostling dog-eat-dog democracy, a mid-century cacophony of robust contradictions and jarring collisions, a thriving combative symbiosis. The old laws and ingrained traditions are suspended, and while much of 1950s North America may be busy donning gray flannel suits or frilly aprons, as the case may be, Duddy is far from the only one chafing against the constraints of conformity. Like a lot of Canadian artists, Mordecai Richler was a hybrid, a bloodletting satirist who nonetheless lovingly celebrated the sublime and vulgar mess that he surveyed. Duddy Kravitz came out 14 years after Hugh MacLennan's Two Solitudes, a Canadian classic of the French-English divide. That divide is alive and lethal in Duddy Kravitz. Indeed, Duddy initiates his relationship with Yvette via a handsome gesture of respect across its invisible line. But in Duddy Kravitz, there are as many solitudes as there are people. And Duddy, while he may try like hell to outrun this knowledge, is also fueled by it. It's a modern existential condition that evokes in him both compassion and a desperate selfishness. Duddy Kravitz is in one way a one-man show, but in another, it's a roistering ensemble piece wherein the voice of our main man competes with multiple points of view. This is a mark of literary sophistication, and it is also a staple of Canadian fiction. Brash novels featuring nervy young Pershicas on the make in more ways than one came out of the US too, notably New York in the 50s, and Duddy Kravitz has taken its place among them. But one of Richler's greatest achievements was that he never apologized for setting his book in what was at that time an international backwater. I fear the work is thinned by too long an absence from roots, he said. Those roots were in St. Urban Street, in Barrenbing High School, in the working-class delis of the Main. He placed Montreal at the center of a highly textured, high-octane world and insisted that that world mattered. It worked. The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz was not only Richler's breakthrough novel, it was the first Canadian international bestseller. A literary page-turner with nary a prairie or wild animal in sight. And true to its Canadian roots, it was written with the financial support of the Canada Council, a type of public organization that, true to his double-barreled sights, Richler both publicly ridiculed and thanked. Duddy may be shameless, but Richler was unashamed. I'm stuck with my original notion, which is to be an honest witness to my time. My place. After all the controversy that this book sparked in the Montreal Jewish community and the wider world at large, irony tempts us to identify Duddy as that most inoffensive of archetypes. Jewish boy striving to make his family proud. The only word missing is nice. And that means he's more of an anti-archetype in this instance. He is crafty and brave, like Odysseus as he strives to get home. A man without land is a nobody. His is a classic rags to riches story, a tale of exile and restitution, the struggle to be a contender. He is a trickster, like Coyote, like Barney Panofsky, penning hilarious phony letters. He is, despite the presence of a father, essentially an orphan, like Jane Eyre. His story, a testosterone-fueled companion piece to Charlotte Bronte's classic. Jane won't be owned, and neither will Duddy, and both start out disenfranchised and despised, yet fight and endure great hardship to become lord of the manor on terms that are morally ambiguous. Jane Eyre, too, was bitterly criticized in its day as vulgar. Jane was too angry, too ambitious, unattractively strong-minded, and far too hot-blooded for any woman, never mind a skinny little spinster. Duddy, too, is an unlovely, unloved child. Quote, a small, narrow-chested boy of 15 with a thin face, black eyes ringed with dark circles, unquote. Swarthy, too Jewish, not Jewish enough, vulgar, horny, grasping, not a good poster boy. We root for him every inch of the way, willing to turn a blind eye when his vulgarity turns to callousness, noticing too late when callousness turns to cruelty. Richler's literary legacy is a family of books rich with contradiction, anger, cruelty, generosity, prejudice, merciless insight, and love. Just like a real family. The word Duddy became code for my older sister and me. Shorthand for a handful of potent, elemental, socially dubious truths about ourselves and what made us tick. In a similar way, an entire nation of Italians coined the term Barnaiano after devouring Barney's version. The specific becomes the universal, which becomes the personal, which gathers critical mass to become public. Richler once stated flatly that the purpose of art is not to change the world. The fact is, good writing can't help but do so. Thank you.
Brains a little bit about this whole experience. So if you just come take a seat.
Thanks, Annie.
I guess one of the first questions I'll start asking is, given that you just read your preface, how difficult or easy was it for you to write it? Did it take you a while to...
All writing is hard. It was hard. Because writing is hard.
How long did it take you to put it together?
Oh,
That's
that
our
was
fault.
there. That's just going right there.
There we go. We both forgot.
How long did it take me to put the preface together? I had a toddler and a baby at the time, so I don't remember. You know what? The time-consuming part of it really was a pleasure, because I got to reread Mordecai's books. And I also read the Joel Yanofsky book, and I immersed myself in Mordecai, and that was beautiful. That was a pleasure, and that was the most time-consuming part. And then I left it to the last minute so that I would be crushed with pressure, and have an excuse to say to my partner, "Okay, over to you."
Deadlines always work.
Deadlines are good. Yeah.
Can you tell me, so what is it about, you said you immersed yourself in reading his novels over again, so what would you say you admire most about his writing and his storytelling?
The vigor, the robustness, the imagination, the exuberance. It's just pow, and very funny, and full of heart. And just a good writer, good writing, good story, great characters. And yes, unapologetic. And I think that when you really go all the way with something, then you find, you always do find the love in a voice that is brave and bold.
So what was it like for you? First of all, being the first Richler Writer-In-Residence at Concordia, what did it mean for you to hold that role?
Well, it's a tremendous honor. Because I grew up admiring and reading Mordecai Richler, it never crossed my mind that I would ever meet him. And writers were remote, august figures. And so it was thrilling, you know? And this is Canada. We're still a small country, and time is telescoped for us. You know, one becomes a gray eminence and a mentor before, well, okay, while I'm still feeling like I'm just trying to figure out how to do this myself, someone's asking me to help other people, or to mentor, or to share the stage with one of my heroes, with one of my literary heroes, which would be Mordecai. And it's shocking and surprising how quickly that seems to happen. But that's part of how time flies when you get older, number one. Number two, and it is the intensity of our country. We have a country which is so, has such a high level of cultural literacy for our population that it's a small world with a very big view.
What was it like for you the first time that you stepped into the reading room? What went through your mind?
Oh, I'm in the toy box. I get to do whatever I want. And my background is theater, so I walked onto a set, and I felt the humor. And the fact is that I was privileged to meet Mordecai a couple of times. And frankly, that's one of the major friendships manqué of my life, was that there wasn't time for me ever to have really had a drink with him. The one time he offered me a drink was backstage at Convocation Hall, and I was about to do a reading, and I said, no thanks, and he went, really? So that was my chance, and I missed it. But walking in there, I spent a couple of minutes in there, and I thought, somebody's been smoking in Concordia. I thought, I know that there's no smoking allowed in the university, and then I realized the books were exhaling. So, when you're with somebody's books, it's one thing to have the recreation of aspects of Mordecai's workroom, and that's a privilege, and that's theater, and that's cool. But truly, these are books that Mordecai read, that he loved, that he handled, that meant something, that he metabolized and used creatively. And so I knew that I was among some of his friends, and that's a beautiful feeling.
So was it easy for you to sort of immerse yourself in that?
Shamelessly easy. I felt completely at home. Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit about, you said you had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times, so what was your first meeting with him, and how did that go about? What was that experience?
Well, I was invited to do a reading at Convocation Hall, which is part of the University of Toronto, and I shared the stage with Michael Andace and Mordecai Richler. And I guess I've told this story a few times. You've probably all heard it. I'm probably that old now. Okay. Well, I did, when I met Mordecai, I shook his hand and I said, I feel like I'm opening for the Stones. And that was true. And that's exactly how it felt. So that was thrilling. That was cool.
What was his reaction to that?
I think he must have enjoyed that. Now I'm so much older now, I can see through his eyes. Attractive, young, I was. You look at pictures of yourself decades ago and you go, I never knew that I was okay looking. Hey, don't you do that, right? I was thin, I was okay. So I look at it through his eyes and I go, that would be flattering. Young authors come up to me and say something admiring to me. They have no idea how much it means to have the admiration of younger people, especially younger writers. So I'm sure he must have enjoyed that, and also just the whole relationship with feminism and being a lesbian and Mordecai with all his political incorrectness, but with his big welcoming vision. We took some of that on in the video dispatches with the Playboy and some of his more insalubrious quotes. So for me, I don't know who's doing it.
I'm not sure. I will put this
here.
We'll just keep going.
Here's the thing. I mean, I'm card-carrying lesbian feminist and have been for decades, and I always admired guys, and I was one of those women who was always surprised when people in the early days of people getting used to the fact that same-sex people were out and proud and everywhere. They'd say, oh, well, you don't like men. I love guys. It's the straight women who have a problem. I love Mordecai. Oh, he said some shitty things. I'm going to take that up with him one day. Maybe I'll grow up and become the writer, the Mordecai Richler Writer-In-Residence at Concordia University, and have my say and have my argument with him that I never got to have over the whiskey. But so yeah, it's complex, right? It's colorful. It's human.
Can you tell me about the relationship to his work, the Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz? Like, I know in your preface you explained how your sister was the one who introduced you to it. But what is it about that book that really speaks to you? Just that it's...
Well, I think that one of the reasons Duddy Kravitz is a classic is that people can identify with him and sympathize with him across great gulfs, right? Gulfs of gender, time, faith, race, etc. It goes on and on. But that's it. I really did feel implicated in his story.
Is there another character in another of his novels that you feel attached to, or that you feel a particular fondness?
Oh, man. Well, Barney, of course, And I was here, for the launch of the residency, we had a kind of a celebratory evening, and I read the passage where Barney sees the love of his life across a crowded wedding, his own. And I love that passage. And yeah, I identified with Barney too. I mean, how's that possible? But I did, and we did. That's what great writing does.
Did you have a mentor yourself as a writer at all, helping you? Did you have a mentor?
No, because my education and my formation really was through theater. So my mentors tended to be theater colleagues. And I came up through the 1980s and early 90s. It was a time of great flowering of the independent theater scene. So my mentors were people who really weren't much older than I was, who were running independent theater companies and really taking a whole lot of risks. And so the writers that I didn't really meet any writers until I was one myself. And now I get to do a certain amount of coaching. I coach the students at the National Theatre School, the acting students in a creation. They create a 5-minute solo piece. And I was also lucky enough to be here and do a few masterclasses and meet dozens of students. And I thought, I'm a mentor. What does that mean? I'm not going to teach anyone how to write. I am not equipped to do that. But what I can do is perhaps place my own beam on them and witness what they're doing and listen to them. Because witnessing is something extraordinarily powerful. And yeah, I gave a little feedback, or I'd answer questions, and we'd have a conversation, but I'm aware that I'm carrying some very, very important and powerful creative energy for them. And if I can put that beam on them and nourish them with that gaze, they're going to tap into it, and it's going to help them to self-authorize. And I think that's very, very, very powerful and valuable. So it's not so much that I told someone where to, put the semicolon, or it really is more listening so that they can hear their own words filtered through me, just through my gaze, back to them. And that's something that I learned from theater as well, because we write as authors, we write for an audience. I write for an audience. I write for the reader. And we all need that important first reader in whom we really believe.
What were some of the highlights, then, would you say, of this opportunity, this experience that you had mentoring?
Oh, highlights?
Yeah.
Well, one was when Alan Shepard brought lunch from Schwartz's. That was definitely a highlight. Drinking the Macallan in the school, in the reading room with the students. Basically, I decided that we'd have communion in Mordecai's reading room. And we did, with smoked meat and whiskey. It was sacred. It was.
Is there anything that you would say that you learned from the students?
Oh, I'm always learning from students. I find it extraordinarily refreshing to be engaged with younger people, young artists, or young people who simply wish to create themselves. That's good. Young people who simply wish to express themselves creatively. And I don't expect or want everyone to become a writer or a professional artist. Some people are going to have that calling. Some people will be surprised by it, maybe even later in life. The power of all of this is through creativity and through just the fact of the arts. Anyway, well, that sounds like a speech, and you're already converted, so forget that. But I am reminded of what's important when I have the privilege of mentoring or being engaged creatively with younger people, because all they want to do is it. And I've done a lot of it, but I've also done a great deal of the business of life. And that can sometimes dampen, flatten, get in the way. So it's very, very refreshing to be with people who are really listening to their imaginations and doing it, you know, almost pretty much full time. And that's exciting, and that's refreshing. And if I can also then complete the circle and tell them that I have the same struggles now that they're having creatively. It's different because I have a career and I'm recognized, etc. But the workings of the imagination and the kind of discipline and love and refreshment that it requires and the commitment is always the same. So there's that commonality as well.
How do you deal with those issues when you're having problems with your creativity? What advice would you give to a writer who's got writer's block, so to speak?
Well, you do have to be patient and kind to yourself. And that can be very, very difficult because art tends to self-select for people who are rather hard on themselves. So cultivating compassion for yourself is very, very important, and having patience and respect for the amount of time that it takes for a creative work to really come to fruition. And writer's block is very, very serious, and sometimes one is blocked because there are other things happening in your psyche that just have to happen. Other stories, other kinds of developments must occur before you can then get on with it or get back to that place where you had marvelous maelstrom of ideas all the time. And you just have to know that that's part of the long arc of a life in art. So it can happen.
Is there one piece of advice specifically maybe that you can give to young writers, or would you say it's just a whole bunch?
Finish.
Finish what you start, right?
Finish. Finishing is hard. Beginning it's like love, right? Oh, I'm in love, I'm infatuated. Just say, oh, and then we're having to make dates to have sex and go to my desk now. I'm gonna have an affair by starting another story. You know, it is like that. You really have to commit because the middle is always the hardest. Beginnings are great. Everybody's got a great idea. Can you stick with that? Can you love, honor, and share with that idea in sickness and in writer's block, in pajamas and laundry? Can you do that with children? And can you really, really stick with that book through that long, or that story through that long middle period where the sheen is off and the thrill is gone? That's faith, that's love, that's the strength of heart that it takes to get from the beginning to the end. And yeah, that's what I can say. That's where it's not for the faint of heart, and that's where it is an endurance game.
Well, thank you very much for all of this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I think what we'd like to do now is you're going to tell us some of the students who are actually going to read their works for us tonight.
We've got 7 students, and a bunch of them were actually in my masterclasses, and I had the good fortune of having some one-on-ones with a few of them. So we've got some bright lights who are going to read for you tonight, and I'm going to name them all. Jonathan Clark, Caitlin Spencer, Sherry Pine, Muttle Sirkin, Manal Malik, Jake Byrne, and Katerina Nchiza. Please welcome them.
Thank you, Ann-Marie. My name is Jonathan Clark. The excerpt I'll be reading is the beginning of a short story wherein a young man experiences familial loss, a financial loss, before discovering a unique business opportunity. It's entitled The Value of Family. Derek's mother, Martha, wanted to be a diamond. She read about a company that would turn her cremated remains into gemstone. Now that she was sick, now that the end was near, she saw her opportunity. She turned to Derek, her only family, to carry out her last requests. I'm going to be a diamond, Martha announced. Are you sure? Asked Derek. You haven't looked through all your options yet. I suppose. I suppose, she replied. What else have you found? Derek pointed to the ads laid across her bedspread. What about this? Ashes to ash trees. You could live for hundreds of years in a forest. No, she said. That doesn't sound like me. What about the arts? You could donate to the museum exhibit you liked. The human mannequins? I liked watching the reactions. People got so worked up. Would you like that, Mom? He asked. I could come visit at the museum. You could educate people, haunt the weak-stomached. No, and I'd be worried that after the exhibit they'd toss me out with the trash, just like your father, after he left us. Just threw us away. Let me tell you, he... I know, interrupted Derek. Anyhow, I'm not going to be a mannequin. I'm your inheritance. I'm going to be a diamond. I'm leaving you me. And with her mind made up, her effervescence diminished, and she passed the following week. Derek tried to contact his estranged father to tell him what had happened. He found a phone number in Martha's old address book. Hello, answered an older voice. Dad? Wrong number. Is this Theo? Who's this? Dad, this is Derek. Yeah. Who? Your son? Martha's? Yes, hi, Dad. I'm calling about Mom? About Martha? Yeah. She's passed away. Thought you want to know? Yeah? I don't know about all that. Oh. So how are you? Is this about money? No. I'm hoping, well, would you have time to meet? It's been a while. What else is this about? Derek decided he would remain estranged to his father. Drops of sun showers sparkled against the windshield as Derek drove Martha's ashes across town. The woman behind the counter at Family Jewels handed him a laminated menu. Is there a certain carat range or color that you're after? Asked the woman. Mom wanted to be a big blue 1-carat rock, replied Derek, but can we talk about the price? This is almost 12 grand. We guarantee the best price around for life diamonds, the woman replied. Then I suppose we'll take your finest of blue. Excellent choice. Would you like it placed in a setting? She passed Derek another detailed menu. We can set your diamond in a ring or a pendant. Maybe as a gift for someone special? Doesn't it seem odd, suggesting my mother could be a gift? It's not odd. It's how my husband proposed. She raised her left hand, flashing the large pink diamond on her ring finger. I never met Gladys face to face. I'm sure she was lovely. She looks lovely now. Your mother will as well. If you're budgeting, then I recommend a simple engagement band. I can discount the band and still keep this under $12,000 for you. Derek agreed. Let's set Mom in a ring. The woman smiled as she rang up the transaction. If this is your first time purchasing a life diamond, you'll be pleased to know they are virtually indistinguishable from mine diamonds, but at a fraction of the cost. Derek returned her smile. He wondered what mining man-made diamonds would look like. Grave digging, he supposed. He waved goodbye to Miriam as he left the store. 4 months later, Derek received his mother by courier. For the first year, she sat in a jewelry box on his mantel. The box sat beside a picture of Martha, sitting beside a lake. At the end of the year, Derek's company downsized. Other companies were not hiring, so he struggled to find another position. His apartment, which had at first been affordable, was now lavish. He began to spend into his savings. Derek was forced to move into a much smaller apartment. He continued to struggle finding work. He sold off furniture to pay his bills until there was nothing but a couch and a coffee table upon which sat Martha and her pitcher by the lake. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Spencer. I'm just finishing up the MA in creative writing here. I'm going to read an excerpt from my story Prairie Water, which takes place in an exceptionally waspy beach house in Delaware. Red, holding court in the living room while music videos play in the background, isn't even that ginger. His hair is, at best, a few shades darker than strawberry blonde, slightly wavy, of no distinction besides. His name used to be Alan up until freshman year. After he developed a crush on a women's studies major who was more interested in smashing the patriarchy than her bids against anyone else's, Alan decided that in lieu of winning her over, he'd piss her off. Indifference, he told Evelyn, is far worse than hatred to the pining heart. But everyone agrees that the Campaign for Redhead Rights was a landmark event in campus activism, a stunning tour de force of satirical community action, a definitive rebuttal to human rights atrocities such as Kick a Ginger Day. One does not use the word ginger in presence of red. Ginger is a slur to be eradicated as mercilessly as any other. Unless one is cooking or watching a late-night marathon of Gilligan's Island, one does not say ginger around red. I can use it, he said once, stumbling over the words, leaning over the back of a dilapidated chair at a shitty basement party with a bottle of Maker's Mark in hand, cap long lost. I can use it as a member of an oppressed, ridiculed, derided group. You can't use it. You're a brunette with a mohawk, which incidentally is a grievous example of cultural appropriation. People see a white man with a mohawk and they think, degenerate punk. They see a Native American man with a mohawk and the lynch mobs come out. Think about that. It has been acknowledged in most camps that Red is a bit of an asshole. Red agrees with these camps. There is no more point in denying his asshole nature than there is in denying the color of his hair, strawberry blonde. He is that particular breed of straight white man who speaks with the unyielding confidence of someone who has never been forced to profoundly second-guess himself. Now, while one of his friends holds back another friend's hair in the bathroom, Red is mixing drinks for himself and anyone foolish enough to take one from him. People who say not to drink alone are full of it, he says to C, who is rolling an unlit Marlboro between two fingers, eyes fixed on the TV. Drink alone. Drink at home. There's better music, you don't go deaf over the bass, your drinks are stronger and cheaper. He holds up the hand with the whiskey, one finger extended beyond the limits of the bottle's lip, raising his eyebrows at Jillian, who is the only one bothering to pay him attention. There aren't assholes encouraging you to drink more? He puts the lid back on the bottle and opens the Coke, filling up 3 glasses to foaming perfection, taking one each to the girls before claiming his own. It's a much better scenario. Shut up, Red, mutters C, sliding the cigarette behind her ear. They've all learned never to ask Red to mix their drinks, if they're sober enough to remember what a terrible idea it is if they want to survive the night sans regurgitation, make it through the following morning without wanting to disembowel any living beings within disemboweling distance. The only bright side about getting drunk enough to forget that a drink from Red is a terrible idea is that by that point, their faculties have shut down enough that they can barely taste the alcohol. C cradles her drink, fizzing away in a small tumbler, plastic, with gaudy goldfish painted on the sides. Jillian, to C's right, makes a face. Jillian does not believe in cocktails served in small glasses. It requires more frequent refills. It's snowing, Jillian says, glancing at the tufts of white falling from the black sky where rain had been before. C traces the outline of one of the faded orange goldfish, her other hand flicking her black Bic lighter on and off again, on and off, keeping time with the music. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sherry Pine. I'm in the first year of my MA in creative writing. I'm from Newfoundland, and this is an excerpt from a semi-autobiographical play I'm writing called Melodramatic Children. It's about my parents. Iris and Mac haven't spoken to each other in 30 years, and that's true. They have some secrets. When they were teenagers, they accidentally got pregnant. They are first cousins, also true. Mac took off and Iris was forced to give up the baby for adoption. They never told anyone, not a soul. 7 years later, they got back together and this time had a baby on purpose. But Mac took off again. This time Iris raised her daughter, Molly, on her own. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. That relationship became strained as Molly got older. In the scene I'm going to read, Iris and her husband, Boz, she remarried, are bickering about Molly, who is now 22. Molly's in her own kitchen, staring at her father, Mac, who after 13 years of no communication whatsoever, has turned up on Molly's doorstep. Mac has also spilled the beans about the cousins thing and the adopted sister thing. And after being raised by Iris her whole life, Molly is pretty pissed off to be learning this from her father. We start with Boz and Iris in their living room. I'm going to play all 4 characters. Are you going to call your daughter? I don't see how that's any of your business. Well, I'd say you ought to call her is all. Now, did I ask you for your opinion about it? Well, you lit into her a bit much, Iris. She slammed the phone down. Do you want me to call her? Here, I'll call her. I'll just stop everything that I'm doing and call her right now because you need to go play cards. Because God forbid you have to wait and never mind the whole house in an unholy upheaval. Iris calls Molly. Molly answers. Hello? I just wanted to say that I'm sorry that you went your whole life thinking that your mother was plotting against you. Hi, Mom. That's not what I said. Oh, well, tell me what you said then. I don't remember what I said. Why are you calling me? She doesn't remember what she said. Oh, wait, I do remember. I said something like, you never tell me the truth. You said I was lying, and I said I certainly was not lying. No, actually, you said I have nothing to hide. And I said, that's a weird thing to say. And then you said, don't be a saucy child. Well, you were being a saucy child. I'm not a child, Mom. I'm 22. And I was asking about our family's medical records, which is a pretty unsaucy, unweird question for a daughter to ask, without her mother losing it. I did not lose it. I was only responding to the tone that you were taking. Well, maybe it's alarming when your daughter asks you a normal question about the past, and you have to think about what you're going to say and what you're not going to say. Mac, her father, Molly. Now, see? That is exactly the kind of tone I'm talking about. Boz. Iris. Mom? Why do you always get mad when I ask you about my father? Where is all this coming from all of a sudden? Do you have something to hide or not? Mac. Molly. I'm very sorry, child, but I have no idea on God's green earth what you're talking about. Does that line of questioning make you uncomfortable because you don't want to talk about my father? Your father? What does your father have to do with anything? That's a really good question, Mom. Molly, Jesus Christ. I have nothing new to say about your father. I've noticed. Well, what do you want me to say, Molly? Jesus, I'm not a mind reader. At some point, you're going to just have to accept that he couldn't be bothered and move on and stop crying in your beer and obsessing over the past. I mean, Molly, you had one parent who loved you and provided for you, at least, and that's more than some people ever have. There's no point in pitying yourself. Iris? What? You're fucking it up. Oh yes, Bob, I'm fucking it up. So there's no medical history on Dad's side, say, that I should know about? Genetically, for example? I don't know what you want from me. This is madness. Iris, there's nothing that might concern me if I want to have children, like if you got killed in an accident tomorrow. There's nothing about my dad or about our family that I should know, nothing that slipped your mind or that you forgot to mention. Molly, Jesus Christ. I've got Boz talking in one ear and you in the other. Everybody's talking at me from all sides and I got that many things to do today, but nobody seems to care what I might have going on. No, I've got to give him a ride to town and practically turn right around and come back and get him again. I'm worn down to a stump by the time all is packing around, answering this, getting ready for that, everybody else, every fucking day of my godforsaken fucking life. Now! Mom? Molly? I was just phoning to apologize. I did not call to be yelled at and disrespected and ordered around and whatever anyone else feels like doing on any given day of the fucking week. Mom, what? At this point, Mac dives for the phone to speak to Iris, and Molly and Mac tussle, but Molly manages to slam the phone down before Mac can get on it. She hung up on me again. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Muttal Zirkin. I'm in the creative writing and computer science program, so you can imagine how comfortable I am right now. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from a short story I wrote called Rules of Attraction. It's the night before my flight out and I can't sleep. I still haven't seen a picture of her, and I can't remember her name, which I think my mother mentioned once, since our date was confirmed 48 hours ago. I go upstairs and find my father on the couch. He's trying to type up an email on his BlackBerry. How do you spell wood, he asks. As in wood floors, or I'd like to talk to you. The second, W-O-L-U-D. The rest of my siblings are just as used as I am to the constant second grade spelling bee that is living with my father. Lucky for us, my mother's usually the one who's wrangled into writing the longer emails. I take a seat at the other end of the couch. If the curtains were open, we might make an interesting study in contrast to a photographer standing outside. Him with his BlackBerry, me with my obscure Android cell phone. I sigh. My father looks at me with a slight head tilt, his shorthand for what's the matter. I can't sleep. I'm too nervous, I say. You shouldn't be. Think of it as a stepping stone. Tell yourself that this is just some girl it's not going to work out with. I can't do that. I have to think of it as Schrodinger's date. He gives me the look that both of my parents give when I say something I know they're not going to understand. Schrodinger's cat is the idea that matter can exist in multiple states until observed. The look doesn't go away, but I press on. The only way it makes sense for me to go on this date is if I don't know whether or not she's going to be my wife until I actually go and find out. Fine, I'm not arguing that point, says my father. I'm just saying that to stop yourself from being nervous, you should think of it as not going to work out. I can't, because then there's no point of me wasting 2 days before semester. Besides, I'm fine with the nerves. They're part of the process. It's like every time I get on stage, I know at some point beforehand I'm gonna be nervous. Fine, says my father. In a way that means I really don't understand you, but you seem to be okay with yourself. After a moment, I wish my father gute Nacht, good night in Yiddish. It's one of the few phrases I still remember from my childhood. Schlaf gesund, sleep well, he replies, as I head down the stairs around the suitcase and into bed. The next evening in New York, Mushki, my date, picks me up from a corner at the periphery of a Jewish part of Brooklyn. It's as away from prying eyes as we can get. She enters the address I give her into the SUV's GPS, and we're off. As we pass the Barclays Center, I break the silence. There's a lot of traffic around here. Yeah. Ever since they opened that stupid place, she says, indicating the stadium. Oh, you ever been inside? Once. I took my niece and nephew to see Disney on Ice. Oh, that must have been nice. The kids seemed to enjoy it. Thanks for driving, by the way. I'm not used to New York drivers. Sure. We lapse into silence as I marvel at how easy it is to not look at the person next to you in a vehicle. Instead, I take inventory of my surroundings. The car seat and sippy cup lead me to conclude that this car belongs to a young family, probably a sibling of hers. When we finally arrive at the hotel, I pay for parking and join her. I direct us to the wrong building, and she corrects me. I hold the door for her, something I do all the time, but for once I'm conscious about it. The hotel lobby is smaller than hotel lobbies on TV. It's quieter, too. Along the open hall that leads to the open desk is a series of alcoves with candles on the table. We turn into one of these. Oh, where would you like to sit? Wherever, I don't care. Either way, she says. It's up to you. Fine, she says, and sits facing the door as though she needs to remember where it is. I sit across and try to not block her view. What do you want to drink? I ask her. Water is fine. I go to the bar and order 2 waters, non-carbonated. I probably should have asked how she preferred the water. Her hands are in her lap when I rejoin her. So, do you like to read? No. Damn it, I think there go about half my icebreakers. Do you follow any TV shows, watch any movies, enjoy any stuff like that? Not really. And there goes my other half. What do you do for fun? I don't know, shop, hang out with friends. What do you do when you're hanging out with your friends? Shop, maybe see a musical? I try to grasp on the thread of conversation. It slips through my fingers. As I sip in my water, trying to come up with something else to talk about, I wonder if she's actually this timid, if it's an exaggerated part she's playing. Not necessarily a lie, but an amplification of characteristics that she thinks I expect. So, you work as a teacher's assistant in preschool, I ask? Yeah. Oh, how old are the kids you work with? 2. That must be hard. Do you have any funny stories? Not really. I just asked because, I used to work in a special ed class and the boys were slightly older, but there were always interesting things happening, funny stories. Oh, that must have been rewarding work. I don't know. It's hard to see the changes from day to day. Like how you don't realize how much you've changed until you see an old picture of yourself. More silence follows. No one tells you that if you can describe the pattern on the carpet, it's probably not going well. The carpet is a simple geometric pattern in red and green. After a bit of silence, I laugh. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking about how this feels like a failed Turing test. The blank look on her face reminds me of the look my father gave me the night before. So I explain. The Turing test is used to see if AI, that's artificial intelligence. Basically, it's a way to test if a computer can pass for human. Her look lets me know I should probably stop talking about things that interest me. I let the explanation stop there. I don't mention that I was thinking about a non-Jewish girl I knew in university who told me the line about failing the Turing test, or about how hard I laughed the first time I heard it. After enough silence between awkward snippets, we escape. All we leave behind are 2 cups of water, hers full, mine empty. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mona Malik. I'm a second-year MA student in creative writing. I'm going to read an excerpt from my story, Watching People, which is about the existential crisis of a maitre d'. Neither member of the couple replied, but instead they kept eating. And again, it was like they saw right through him. He rubbed his nose. He wiped his eyes as they swam and bleared. On Thursday night, he had dreamt about the man before he had ever seen him. He walked away from their table. The faces in the room became gargantuan, slurs of lips and ears and wisps of hairs, and as they came toward him, he shuddered. Their voices were caverns of blue. All of these people were just the precursors to the ghosts in his dreams. Their chatter tasted like ash in his mouth. His ears rang and the vibrations passed under his feet. The potted plants at the entrance of the restaurant grew vine-like against the walls, spread toward the exits. A waiter passed by with a tray of baklava. The maitre d' could feel him look down and see the shape of his well-dressed body on the floor, the waiter's Italian loafers perilously close to his nose. The couple asked for more water. From the corner of his eye, he tried to observe them. His entire eye sockets teared up, brimming with salt water. What was it like to understand each other like that? They had no need for words. They drank the water brought to them by a second waiter. In sync, they chewed their rice. Are you okay, man? The first waiter helped the maitre d' to his feet and brought him to the kitchen. The couple did not look up once while he was led away. The waiter held a cold washcloth to the maitre d's forehead and fed him cool cucumber water. The maitre d' went back out, despite the disconcertion of the waiter and the sous chef, hurtling through the room like a dervish, giving out bread to those who hated bread, who had too much bread, water to the overly hydrated. He went around and around the blurred faces. They had ruined him. They had seen right through him, and it had ruined him. The couple sat at a table in the middle of the restaurant, untouched by the collapse of everything around him. At 9, the cellist came in to play her regular soft repertoire. No, something different tonight. Please, he insisted, his fingers fidgeting with his lapel. And so she played a dark phase, the underbelly of the moon. And he sat and listened and let someone take over his duties for the night. The cellist began to sing along with her chilling string section of 1, and the broken sounds that came from her throat pulled him into a kind of reverie, and he remembered every moment that had ever brought him low. And yet, the couple looked on. They ate their extra bread. He ran into the break room, his bones full of a fuzzy material. It gave him a strange feeling when he walked, like everything was not right. Joints out of place, body of fat misaligned with skeleton, skin slapped on loosely. A flat noise sounded in his ears, the noise of the chef and sous chef negotiating recipes. The maitre d's eyelids glued to plastic lenses when he closed his eyes, his pupils rotating only slightly, soundlessly, when he glanced right to left. He bit slices of old lip skin, peeled whole constellations of dandruff from the back of his skull. His fingers were made of nervous tics, his blood vessels dilated and percolated in the air-conditioned cold. It ran through his body, tensing every muscle fiber. His mouth was acid reflux and metal. He went back out again. His chin pointed to the far wall, the stuccoed entrance with its sophisticated wood sign. There were 3 groups of would-be patrons waiting, their feet tapping, their arms folded. He seated them, hummed the menu specials as waiters swam to each table. All the while, he prickled in anticipation of closing out table 4. He was wrong. All this time he followed what he thought was his heart, but these 2, they saw through him, and he realized he would never be the same. There was nothing left in him. He was lost space, disjointed. He was nothingness. Any more? Sorry? He asked. He stood in front of table 4 without realizing how he came to be there. The woman was looking at him, her fish eyes trained on the bump of his nose. Can we get a doggy bag? She hadn't spoken before. Her voice was nasal, grotesque, made the cucumber water squirm in his stomach. The man snorted, blew his nose loudly over and over on an unsightly handkerchief, raising eyebrows from the customers at the next table, and took out his wallet. The maitre d's eyes followed the couple as they walked to the cash behind their waiter. He felt empty. He would go home early. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Jake Byrne. I'm entering my final year of my undergraduate studies in English and creative writing in Concordia. And I'll be reading 3 poems tonight, so if there is to be applause, please hold it until the end. The first poem I'm going to read is called Coletti's Station. It begins with 2 epigraphs. The first is by Petra Laszlo, the far-right camera woman of the first line, who was filmed kicking Syrian migrants as they crossed the Hungarian border. And it reads, I'm practically in a state of shock because of what I did and what has been done to me. I panic now as I'm watching the footage. It's like it wasn't even me. About a week later, Viktor Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary, said this in a televised interview. There is no fundamental right to a better life. Coletti's Station. First you came for the far-right camera women, and I did not speak out, for I was not a fuckwit. Now, watching the footage, it's like a foreign film I watched as a child in a dream, maybe, with the soundtrack Moonlight and the occasional cicada. You washed the streets clean, swept Romani into dusty little corners of former industrial cities, sold fresh cabbage and carrots in Kaczynski Street. A culture is absolutely worth defending. I, for instance, just tossed out my ex's sourdough fermenting on the fridge 6 weeks after he left. The radical choice is a population as pasty and refined as lung gauche. It's like it wasn't even me, tourista in jack boots on the dance floor, sucking back figne and complicity. There is no fundamental right to a better life, of course, but you reserve the right to scrape the grout off octagon Is that the Hullas Bastia you'd like to die on? Well, perhaps not. But it better to enjoy your meal at the Andrashi Burger King that way, with under a sky expressionless and cold as a denied visa. Silent now, I hear the coming of a train. This second poem is called Adventure Time. The Craigslist post requested 2 boys, bushy-tailed, chipmunk-cheeked, pure hearts, yada yada. We struck camp at daybreak in a hamlet where Churchill's voice is still tonic as brandy. I love you, but we need to find clean water and a flower that blooms with the fragrance of mischief. I don't or can't tell you about the men I think I'm kissing before I've fully woken up. I'm not asking for a love spell, just its shadow word, commitment. When we speak of things worth doing, we're not talking about risk. I've tried Advil and the Almanac, stuck my dad's gem steel machete in the mouth of your tributary, but the beach was needled with irukandji stings. And if I fall victim to ensorcelment, visions of other lives spent with other bodies, the subtle glamours of creme de violette, consulted a friendly teenage hairuspex, she ripped a wet fistful of entrails, orange with Easy Mac. This is, at best, a neutral omen. But baby, we can make it work. I can do it for you. Be a conduit. Interpret the letter of the lightning and its implications. Everything that enters, exits into that undiscovered country. The final poem I'll be reading tonight is called Hellfire. 55,000 people died of AIDS before Ronald Reagan ever mentioned it in a public address. At Nancy Reagan's funeral, Hillary Rodham Clinton said the following statement to MSNBC. It may be hard for your viewers to remember how difficult it was for people to talk about HIV/AIDS back in the 1980s. And because of both President and Mrs. Reagan, we started a national conversation. And, you know, that too is something that I really appreciate with her very effective, low-key public advocacy, but it penetrated the public conscience. Hellfire. And we loved low-key penetration. Tin chill of calipers, scarlet calligraphy of biopsy. We just loved it. And these were our homes, the wheeze of plastic sheeting, wrapping the plague ward, jocular press secretaries. We begged to remain public, remain conscious, obtained secondhand China services, tattered red pantsuits, our commemorative quilts, all from the company store. It may be hard for your viewers to stomach your flailing in the wind, a colostomy bag, like you were just empty skin tied to a flagpole at half-staff, like rats had gobbled your insides. If silence equals death, 55,000 dead equals a national conversation. Better, you know, secretary of hell than handmaiden of heaven. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Katerina Inshiza. I'm a graduate student in the English and Creative Writing department. I'm going to read a short story called Sock. The relationship lasted 6 months. The breakup was over the phone, and Lucy was devastated. She cried non-stop for 6 days and 6 nights, and on the 7th day, she rested. After all the crying, she decided to give her room a spring clean, reorganize her life, and get herself back on track. She pushed aside her bed, and amongst the dust bunnies and chocolate wrappers was her ex-boyfriend's old sock. She picked it up. It was a plain black sock, similar to hers, but with different ribbing on the toes, so she knew it was his. Lucy burst into tears. Her roommate ran into the room and said, "What's wrong?" I found Michael's sock," Lucy stammered. "So?" asked her roommate, putting an arm around her friend. "What should I do with it?" "What do you mean?" "Like, should I keep it?" "Why on earth would you keep one of his old socks?" "It's the only thing I have from him." "That's because he was an asshole who never gave you anything." Lucy looked at the sock and shook her head. "He must have grabbed one of my socks by mistake. He wouldn't have left with just one sock." "Throw the sock out. This is unhealthy." But Lucy didn't throw it out. At first, she kept it under her pillow and would stroke her face with it at night and use it to dry her tears. But one day, 2 buttons popped off her cardigan. She'd been eating a lot of breakup brownies. And this gave her an idea. She sewed the 2 buttons on her ex-boyfriend's sock, giving him a lovely, quizzical face. She adored her sock puppet boyfriend. They would stay up talking all night, getting to know each other again. He would ask about her family, and now he remembered all her cousins' names and offered to drive her grandma to the hospital. Of course, being a sock, he couldn't drive, but the thought was very sweet. They still had rough patches, like the time when one of his eyes fell off. At first it looked like there was nothing to be done because she had no more thread in her sewing kit, but she swore she would be his nursemaid until the day she died. However, in the end, Lucy found some thread, operated on him, and he recovered. Lucy's roommate often heard her chatting away in her room, but Lucy explained that she was just Skyping with her headphones on. It felt quite exciting to have to hide their love. It was just like when they first got together and he still had another girlfriend. Eventually, Lucy stopped caring about being judged and wore her sock puppet boyfriend on her hand wherever she went. People in town would see her whispering to her sock puppet in the supermarket aisle, at the bus stop, in the doctor's office. Lucy's roommate kicked her out, and Lucy and her sock puppet boyfriend had to move back in with her parents. Lucy's parents had never liked him, but they definitely did not warm to the sock reincarnation of Lucy's boyfriend. Lucy's mother would sneak into her room at night and try to steal the sock puppet, but Lucy clung onto him tightly. She enjoyed being the big spoon this time around. After a while, her parents decided to stage an intervention, and her beloved sock puppet boyfriend was snatched from her by lumpy cousin Justine and thrown into the garbage disposal. Lucy's heart forever broken, she lived out the rest of her lonely life working as a sales assistant in the menswear section of a local department store. The legend goes that her ghost still haunts the sock aisle, searching for her long-lost love. Thank you.
I guess all I can say at this point is wow. And that was just a sample of their talent. So a big congratulations to all the writers who shared their stories. In fact, I'd like to know if they're willing to give us copies so we can actually read the stories and find out what happens to those main characters in most of those stories and all those stories. I want to thank everybody for being here, and I'd like to call Ann-Marie back onto the stage to give a couple of words to close the evening. Ann-Marie? She was right there. We'll give her a couple more seconds. I don't think so, because she was right there. I don't know what's going on behind. behind stage. But you know what? I think I'll go check. Okay, I'll be right back. I've been told to wait a couple more seconds. So we'll wait and see, and hopefully she'll pop up somewhere. Oh, hi.
So Ann-Marie left the building.
Oh.
Yes.
Is everything okay?
Everything is fine.
Okay.
So she left this thank you note.
Okay, thank you.
The DVD.
Okay, do we know what's on it?
No, we don't.
Can we play it?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
I'm going right now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So before we get that recording out, I just have a couple more words to share with you. I wanted to just mention that there are still 2 out-of-town Thinking Out Loud Walrus Talks this year. One of them is on this Thursday, April 21st in Ottawa, and the other one is on April 27th, and you can find out more at concordia.ca/TOL. Also, photos from this event will be posted on Concordia's social media channels, and you can find us on Facebook at Concordia Alumni. Are you guys ready to...
The video is ready.
The video is ready? Excellent. Let's watch. I guess that's why she left us. Thank you so much, and hope you had a great evening. Thank you very much.